This is 4:30, Crisis Communications. I'm Dr. Egensperger. Wait for a second till I bring up some slides. And now let's get started. This is about crisis communications, and some of the photos you see here are some of the most memorable crises that businesses have faced, and they'll be part of what we'll be talking about. Up in the left-hand corner, you see fire boats trying to put out the flames in the Deepwater Horizon, which occurred in the Gulf of Mexico when an oil rig exploded. Bottom left, you see the Costa Concordia, a cruise ship that hit the rocks off the coast of Italy and sank, just about sank, and 32 people died. And up in the right-hand corner, you may think of that as your local neighborhood Domino's, but Domino's had a problem. They had to face a crisis because some of their employees thought it would be cute to adulterate, mess with the pizzas, and put it on video and share it with the world over YouTube. So those are the kinds of crises that we'll be talking about, along with some more mundane but important kinds of crises. Today, or this week, I want to talk to you about the course, what's expected, what we'll be doing, big picture over time, and then we'll talk in detail about how we define crisis communications and how we're going to approach it and the scope and continuum of the course. This is an online course, and I suspect most of you have taken one before. A number of you have been in my course before. So I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail. It's just that when you are online and you have the freedom to be at home, sometimes deadlines slip by. Well, I don't want that to happen for either one of us. It's easier for me, and I get the work in an organized way when it comes in on time, and your grades will be better if you get the work done on time. So there'll be multiple deadlines each week. In general, it goes like you need to post to the discussion board by midnight on Wednesday, and then read other posts and comment on one or two of them again by midnight on Sunday. Other parts of the other assignments will be due also at midnight on Sunday. So the weekend could be a busy time for you. So that's kind of the weekly scheduling. I suggest that you put some time on your calendar or do it mentally, however is most convenient, and say, I'm going to be on the computer doing my homework and reading and whatever for an hour a day or a couple hours, a couple times a week. I've taken a lot and taught a lot of online courses, and it's best to have set times as if you were going to be in the classroom. That makes it more likely that you're going to get the work done. And I would suggest you schedule a little more time as we start the course, and you'll get into the rhythm of it, and you'll be able to get things done on time and in the best possible way, so that you have some time to read them over and to make them the best you can. The assignment requirements, I've listed the number of pages generally, or the number of words for each assignment. I expect them to be done kind of as you see in this bottom graphic here. Your name, the course, the assignment code. Each assignment has a code that tells me, in this case, it's week 1, assignment A. So it's the first assignment of week 1. Put my name on if you like. That's not important. And put the date on. And you have to upload them onto Canvas. It's not complicated. And if you get this template built early on in the course. It'll be a lot easier for you. Um, they need to be done on a computer. Do not make them as PDFs, please. That just makes it more difficult for me and takes more time. I will read them, comment on them, highlight changes or other things that I think could have been done better, or highlight things that you've done really well. Not everything is correction. I like to see thinking. I like to see innovative ideas come out of it. So I will highlight those. I will give you the grade and put the grade into the grade book immediately. Get things back to you as quickly as possible. 7 weeks is not a long time, so I move pretty quickly. You need to be aware that there's a major paper due at the end of the course, which is the end of June, June 26th. And then we will build up to it. I'll have a couple of 3 or 4 assignments building the pieces of that final assignment, but it will have to be ultimately an 8 to 10 page paper, not counting cover page and references. Everything is APA style, but you'll need to read the book, which you see here, and some other materials that I've posted on Canvas, as well as listen to these lectures. There'll be 1 lecture a week. It'll be posted by Tuesday noon, if not sooner, and it'll be available. I'll send out an email with the URL so you can access it. It's not accessible to anybody but people in this course. I like to keep moving. I don't like things to be late. And in the world of communications and mass communications and journalism, deadlines are critical. So it's good to get into the habit of meeting deadlines, working ahead of the deadline to make sure that you do all the research and the writing and the checking that you need to do. Okay. Let's talk about crisis communications. This is, in my mind, and in the crises I've lived through and worked on, how organizations communicate in threatening situations. I don't mean necessarily life-threatening, although that does happen, but organizations have lives of their own. Organizations come and go, and sometimes there's a crisis that affects them so much that they go out of business. Sometimes that can be helped. Sometimes it is completely out of the blue and it takes down a company before the company realizes what happened. So what we're going to talk about is how the best way that communications can help organization managers and executives to respond to a crisis. And those responses have 3 distinct segments, 3 distinct types of preparation and response, including planning before a crisis. I was responsible for the strategic planning in a large corporation as one of my jobs. And we were looking out 5 to 10 years to think about what kind of issues might face the corporation during that time. Was it technology issues, changes in the technology we were using, changes in technology that were coming over the horizon, economic, what was happening in the world, or especially in places where we had important customers, employee issues, competitive issues, other companies trying to beat us on price or technology function, or take away our clients. So we did a lot of thinking about possible things that could affect our company. So we planned on that. I remember one time, my boss and I put together a whole package of response in case some of the workers in our factories decided to unionize. We paid them very well. We treated them very well. They had a good health plan, but it was a possibility, and we were hearing rumors that some people were trying to unionize our plants and take away some of the flexibility that the company had. So we put together videos, talking points, speeches, Q&A, questions and answers for the press. And we prepared in case that this happened. Never did, but we spent time, energy, money to plan for it, so we'd be ready in case something did happen. So the second major area that we talk about, and it's one of the most visible, is what does a company do during a crisis? How does it respond? How does it talk to its various stakeholders, whether they're investors or employees or the press or government regulators or any number of different groups of people who are worrying about what's happening to the company. We're also, and then finally, and the book makes this point quite well, how does a company respond when a crisis is over? And what does it learn so that it will not respond the same way or not as it did without the planning? So how can you prepare for the next one, and what lessons are there to be learned? Here's not an exhaustive list, but a list of the types of crises that organizations may face. They can be caused by nature, whether it's hurricanes or tsunamis, forest fires, floods, lightning strikes, hailstorms, snowstorms. All those kinds of things can interrupt the flow of business, can disrupt factories. You can be flooded out. You could have a hurricane that destroys a factory that's critical to making parts for your company. So those kinds of things can happen to any company depending on where it is located, and they will take you by surprise. You may have a couple of days warning, but it's still not something that you expect. Although if you're living in the Gulf Coast, you can expect that there's going to be a hurricane season every year. Some are worse than others, but you need to think about what you will do in that situation. Organizational crises. Maybe there's a foodborne illness like E. coli that gets into the company cafeteria. Or if you're like some of the packaged foods companies, you can get E. coli in your salad mixes. So those kinds of things can hurt your company, hurt its reputation, corporate malfeasance, corporate officers stealing from a company, or doing insider trading. A couple of major companies have been brought to their knees because they had bad managers who were stealing from the company. Enron comes to mind immediately, so does WorldCom. Ethical and behavioral issues. We've seen a number of these in recent years on people who are misbehaving in the marketplace or misbehaving in the company and taking advantage of powerless people that in bad behavior. Political or governmental. If your company is operating in a country that is overrun by rebels, or there's a coup which hurts the company, that can be a political situation that you have to deal with. And you have to worry about your people. You have to worry about your intellectual property. You have to worry about how you respond to it, so you stay in business, so that you can continue to serve your customers outside of that. War and military actions, kind of a similar situation, but sometimes you have to continue to operate when the country where you're operating is at war. I was in Vietnam, and I saw people from IBM and from other companies who were fixing our office equipment and certainly repairing military vehicles, companies who were not military, but were military contractors. So what happens in those situations and what are the extraordinary measures you have to take. Plain old accidents. I talked about the Costa Concordia and Carnival Cruise Lines. Boeing is in a terrible situation now because two of its most modern planes crashed, and it's having to recover from that. And that should say plane instead of plan. I take full credit for that mistake. Blackouts. There have been huge blackouts. I was on the East Coast when New York went dark for a couple of days. And I was in another blackout that was caused by a blizzard. So those disrupt companies. They change work schedules. They may hurt your production. You may be in the middle of making some product that is spoiled because the equipment breaks down. So you can see from the definitions, there's all kinds of possibilities, and they're focused on, and different industries and different companies have to focus on ones that are more likely to occur in their situations. Three consistent attributes of crises for businesses. They take businesses by surprise. So that's where planning helps, because if you're planned even at the minimal level, you will be taken less by surprise and you will have something to do when a crisis occurs. They may be a threat to your business, short-term or long-term. And you don't have a lot of response time. You need to have answers immediately. Now, the two pictures I've put up here, one is Tylenol, which faced a situation in 1982 when somebody was opening up Tylenol capsules. And so that's why you see Tylenol as pills now. They can't be opened. And in 1982, people were taking apart the plastic capsules and putting strychnine, a poison, in there. Tylenol, it's a classic story in public relations and emergency management. Tylenol immediately stopped all sales, cleared all the shelves from drugstores and grocery stores across the country, and said, we won't sell any more Tylenol. The company was Johnson & Johnson. We will not sell any more Tylenol until we get to the bottom of this and we know what happened. We don't think it was our problem, and it turned out not to be. People were taking the pills, putting the poison in, putting them back on the shelf. And the people have never been caught, interestingly. But the response by Johnson & Johnson to face up to it, to respond immediately, even at the loss of a good deal of money, and to be completely forthright in what it was doing to respond, is a classic case of great crisis management and communication. Pepsi faced a situation in 1993 when syringes, needles for medical use, were said to be found in some Diet Pepsi cans. Now, Pepsi immediately responded and said, that's virtually impossible. And it brought the news organizations into its bottling plants where these Pepsi cans were being made. And it showed, I remember seeing the speed with which those were being filled and sealed. And it said, look, there's no way in the world that a syringe could get into this can. And nonetheless, it took measures, it explained things, it quit selling Diet Pepsi in that marketplace for a while. And then it found out that people were indeed trying to pull something on the company. So it was sabotage from outsiders. In both these cases, they responded quickly. They were very forthright. They put their customers first, their customers' safety and health, and they didn't lose. In fact, they gained market share because they were seen as a responsible company, and they eliminated the concern by being very responsible and very responsive. Here's a working definition from the book about what organizational crises are. And we're talking about organizations. There are all kinds of crises. There are personal ones, and there are other kinds of crises, but we're going to focus on ones that mainly affect organizations like businesses and to some degree governmental agencies. So an organizational crisis is specific. It talks about one thing, like the Tylenol situation, unexpected, as was the Tylenol situation, or the Deepwater Horizon. Non-routine, yeah, this is out of the ordinary. It's something we don't expect. Now, in some companies, they can expect breakdowns in their production. They can expect some disruption for some reasons that are somewhat predictable. But mainly, we worry about crises that are out of the ordinary. It's an event or series of events that create high levels of uncertainty and simultaneously, at the same time, present the organization with opportunities for and threats to its high priority goals. Now, I talk about those high priority goals are the reasons an organization is set into operation. Why is it in business, so to speak? Well, most businesses are in business to make money, to serve their communities, to keep their shareholders profitable, to serve their employees, and to be good corporate citizens. And so if a crisis disrupts any of that, it's not good for the health of the company. And like I say, some of these situations could drive a company out of business. So that's kind of and then the opportunity, which is described here, is the opportunity to learn from the crisis and eliminate the situation which may have enabled that crisis to occur. Now, you can't eliminate every crisis, or you never go out of the house because you might get struck by lightning, but you can plan for ones that are of greater likelihood. And that's the kind of thing that you want to be able to respond to quickly and with certainty. Organizational crises and sources. Where do crises come from? Terrorism. We think of terrorism as being like 9/11, but there have been numerous incidents of domestic terrorism. You may want to look up the Oklahoma City bombing, where two guys put a truck full of fertilizer and exploded it in front of a federal building in Oklahoma, and a bunch of people died because they really blew up the building. Now, that was it, and those people were upset at the government. They thought the government was overreaching. So that's why we see a lot of big cement flower pots or other obstructions in front of buildings, so trucks and other vehicles can't get close enough to do that kind of damage anymore. Sabotage. Sometimes employees are unhappy and they consciously sabotage your business. I had an employee once when I was working on a newspaper who was mad at one of the editors and purposely put in some bad language and some nonsensical material into the newspaper. And of course, we were trusting. We didn't read every item before in the production system. And it got into the printed paper and it was out the next day. And we fired the person. We knew who it was. But there's, you can only look over people's shoulders so much. So there is sabotage. Workplace violence, you've heard of the term going postal, where an unhappy employee comes back and sometimes goes to a post office and shoots people, or goes to where they were working and where they'd been fired or where they'd been dissed or otherwise been upset. And that happens more often than we like to believe. And but it does happen. Poor employee relationships. That's where those situations where employees are not being treated right, they're working too many hours, they aren't being paid well, and they will maybe react by sabotage, maybe by violence, maybe by going on strike. So that's one of the ways that a company can face a crisis of its own making. Poor risk management, not taking not taking notice of what could happen, especially in industrial situations or in the airlines. In what kind of risks does your business face, and how do you eliminate the most likely risks? How do you respond to that and make it safer for everybody and make it more likely that you'll stay in business? Hostile takeovers is a business situation, but a company may be faced with that, an unlikely or an undesirable takeover where an outside organization buys up a bunch of stock or buys up a big part of the company and says, we want to take it over, we want to run it the way we want to run it. There are ways that you can prepare for that. You can insulate yourself from it, but you also do have to respond to it because it's a public situation. Unethical leadership. We've seen some people being fired from their jobs because they weren't doing a good job. It happens in colleges. It happens in a lot of organizations because people take advantage of situations and they don't behave in a proper and responsible way. So those are the sources of some organizational crises. Non-organizational events. We talked about natural disasters like hurricanes or blizzards, disease. We're in the middle of that. We're in the middle of probably the worst disease outbreak in your lifetime. This is virtually unheard of and so widespread that there's hardly been anything like it for the past 100 years. And we'll talk more about it. There's a paper that I've posted for next week, not for week 2, which talks about how companies are communicating with their employees during this COVID-19 outbreak. Technical interactions. We can think of a couple of things that have happened. Samsung had to take one of its folding folding tablet off the sales floor. Had to recall it because it was breaking. They hadn't done it right. There was some other phones that were starting on fire. They weren't working right. So product failures in multiple industries. It's not only in technology, but also in automobiles, in buildings. There's been a lot of failures, and those are not easy to predict, but they are predictable, especially if there's a big push to get something out that isn't fully tested right. It can happen also in the pharmaceutical industry. Downturns in the economy. We've been very lucky, and you have been lucky throughout most of your teenage years to be living in a very good economy in the United States. We're in the middle of a what do we call it? We don't know yet. A pause, a retrenchment in the economy, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm always positive, but a lot of people are out of work right now as I speak. They probably, a majority of them will go back to work in the next short period of time, but some of them won't. Some businesses are just going out. And how do businesses respond to that? And we've seen a lot of different responses over the past few weeks. So those things are very difficult to plan for. But in general, companies that are well run, that are well managed, can respond because they know where their strengths are and how things are going to affect them. One of your assignments for this week is to look at these crises in chapter 4 of the book and pick one of them to kind of be your focus for this 7 weeks that we're in class. I talked about British Petroleum, or BP as it's known, and the Deepwater Horizon fire in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a fire, the number 2 here is a fire at Malden Mill, which is the maker of fleece garments, and it's an example of how a small company responded very well and took care of its employees very well at a crisis situation. Tainted apple juice is another food product story. Pink slime beef is an interesting story about how a funny description, not a funny, but a misplaced description of a product which is perfectly healthy and perfectly used all the time can hurt a company, and how it should be careful about what it calls things internally. Kansas tornado, another natural disaster. The Atlanta Olympics bombing, you may have heard about that, read about it, since it's so close to home. And then there's the Domino's Pizza video, which I talked about. Now, I think some of these are more interesting than others. You're welcome to choose them or choose, there's some others in the book in chapter 6. Or you may have heard something that interested you, or it's in an industry that you're interested in. If you are not going to choose from one of these 7, then send me an email and tell me which crisis situation you would like to work on, and why you think it would be attractive and valuable to examine it. That's about the end. Let me summarize. We've defined crises. We talked about some crises that we have been famous, and some of which have been handled well, and some of which have not been handled so well. I've given you examples, and we talked about the assignments for the week. I recommend that you check in with Canvas at least every other day, if not daily, because I will post notices and items from the news periodically. I expect work to be checked and double-checked, written in good APA style, and done on time, not complicated. This week, there's a discussion board. Remember to post twice and choose your crisis. And let me say, I look forward to working with you. I will post my phone number on Canvas, so you can text me or call me if you have a question. I'm on email all the time, but communicate with me however you want, and we can have phone, Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, whatever means of communication works best for you. So that's it for this week. I'm looking forward to it. It's an interesting and somewhat challenging topic. So let's enjoy it.